Harrison Burton gets win number 100 for the Wood Brothers in a wreck-filled race in Daytona, and it completely shakes up the cut line and the playoffs in general once again. So let's get into it. Coming up next. What's going on, everybody? Hope you're doing good today. All right, Harrison Burton in his 99th start gets the win. That puts him in some pretty impressive company. Chase Elliott and Kyle Larson, as you see here from a post from Breakhard, also won in their 99th start. So that is a pretty cool statistic right there. Not sure if it's going to go the exact same way for Harrison Burton, who only has 6 top 10s previous to this. Both of those drivers, of course, had multiple top 10s previous to this. But it does probably bode well for him. He was fired from this ride. He is still currently searching for a seat. He even joked in the interview afterwards that, hey, I wish I'd done this before I got fired. Maybe it would have saved my job. So he had a good sense of humor. Great interview after the race. Great story all the way around, because not only did he win, which could possibly help him get a seat in the Xfinity Series where he has 6 wins and I think 49 top 10s. So maybe somebody in the Xfinity Series sees this and says, hey, this guy's really good in the Xfinity Series and we know he can get it done at plate speedways and tracks like that. But this is also really popular because this is the 100th win for the Wood Brothers. Josh Berry, of course, signed to the Wood Brothers next year, saying he really hoped he could get that win number 100 for the Wood Brothers. Well, Harrison Burton, I think Harrison Burton came out and said that he wants to get it first before Josh Berry gets there. He ends up getting it first. Not a lot of people had that on the radar. And this completely, of course, shakes up the point standings. Like I said during the Richmond deal, a man 30th in points winning is always going to be something NASCAR doesn't want, because that's usually a driver that's not had a great season or is a lower superstar in the NASCAR spectrum, and it's going to bump out a bigger superstar, and NASCAR likes to promote their superstars in the sport. But in this particular occasion, NASCAR does not have an out. They have a man, unlike Richmond, they could take Austin Dillon out in points to, an infraction or anything like that. They can't take Harrison Burton out and point to an infraction. So now you have what I wanted with the Austin Dillon deal, which is what I thought the Austin Dillon deal was all about and why it was such a big deal. You have a man that's 30th in points taking a spot away from a driver that is much higher in points and in a meritocracy would have earned a playoff bid. So once again, this exposes the NASCAR playoffs as being an opportunism system as opposed to a meritocracy, and that is all I've been talking about since Richmond. I feel like I've just repeated myself over and over again, but it just exposes a very, very flawed playoff system. And I'm not saying you need to get rid of the playoff system. I'm just saying you need to make adjustments to the rules in the playoff system, because this is not necessarily the greatest system to crown a champion. Particularly when several drivers that have won races this year are outside of the top 16 in points. This driver outside of the top 30. And if Ricky Stenhouse Jr. hadn't have wrecked at Richmond, you would have 2 guys that were outside of the top 30 in points when they got their win. So this system right here definitely needs to be tweaked. Me personally, I think there's a few things you can do. First off, 16 drivers in the playoffs is too much. The playoffs are only special if a certain amount of drivers get in. I thought 12 was the number. 12 is always a better number in my opinion. It makes it special to get into the playoffs, and the guy racing for the 13th spot in the playoffs getting a huge chunk of money, maybe like $500,000 or something like that for being the best person not in the playoffs. I thought that was always fun to watch under the old Chase system. And I think the old Chase system was pretty good. I think the only reason it got ruined is because Jimmy Johnson and Chad Knaus figured out that Chase system before the rest of the teams could figure out what they were doing, basically points-wise, and how they were playing the season in the system. So I think the first thing you can do is limit it down to 12 drivers. The other thing you can do is, no matter what, just make sure all of those drivers, you can still do the win and you're in, but you win and you're in, and you have to be above 25th in points or 20th in points. I know a lot of people are saying you got to be above top 30. I think that's too low of a bar. I think it has to be either 20 or 25th in points. Somewhere in there has to be the happy medium. So you have to be, I would say 20th. I would say you have to be top 20 in points and get a win. That way, guys that are super far back there, it would discourage them from wrecking for the win. So I think that would be the thing to do, because, of course, the famous quote this week from Steve Phelps was, "This is not Demolition Derby," right? So playing right off of that Demolition Derby quote from Steve Phelps on the Kevin Harvick podcast Happy Hour, We had a demolition derby at Daytona, so it's ironic that he said that. He probably picked the wrong week to say that one, right? Did he not? Because over half of the field was wrecked here in this race once again, and that is not anything new. That is becoming a trend at the Daytona cutoff race, or in this case, 2 races before the cutoff race, before the playoffs begin. And if NASCAR really didn't want demolition derbies, they wouldn't put Daytona right before basically the playoffs begin. They know that these drivers are going to be super amped up, and you saw it throughout the race. There was not a single driver in the top 20 that did not throw some type of move at some point that could have caused a wreck. Now, some of the drivers that threw moves did cause a wreck, but there were several drivers throughout this race. Just about everybody's favorite driver threw a move at some point in this race that could have caused the big one. Everybody was just driving up on the wheel, and it was fun to watch. But everybody was definitely overly aggressive because of what was on the line. That's drivers from 30th on back, because they knew this was their one opportunity to get into the playoffs, which once again, alluding back to the playoff system I mentioned earlier, if they had to be top 25 or 20 in points, that would eliminate a good significant portion of these drivers that think this is their only opportunity to get into the playoffs because they know they weren't already top 20 in points. But it wasn't only the volume of wrecks and the overly aggressive driving that was the story. We once again had cars flip. We saw Michael McDowell get upside down. He got back on his wheels when he landed, but then Josh Berry, not even a few laps later, goes all the way on top of his roof, slides and hits the interior wall. Once again, NASCAR added some shark fins. Those shark fins that said they had 20 to 30% better, downforce or whatever to keep the cars on the track looked like they had little to no effect on the cars today because once again, they flipped over. This, of course, following the Michigan race where the same thing happened with Corey LaJoie and in the Xfinity Series. Which brings me to my next point. It's pretty obvious for everyone with eyes and any type of knowledge about racing. It is the underwing, the underpinnings, the underbody, whatever you would like to call it. That is what causes this. We've seen this in other series that don't go around in circles at high speed. But we've seen in other series that underpinning, that underbody, the underwing causes cars to flip when that underwing hits the wrong angle. So at some point on these super speedways, NASCAR is going to have to acknowledge that the underwing is a really, really big part of this, and they need to do something about it, whether it is cut sections in it for these particular super speedway races or just have a whole different system because the body ties into the underwing. So you have to have something there, but you're going to have a different one for super speedways and things like that because you can't just take it all the way off. But we're once again in this situation where NASCAR is going to try everything but that underwing, it looks like. Just like when the cars were backing into the walls and NASCAR's like, no, we're going to do this and this and this. It's not a problem. They buried their head in the sand. They're probably going to bury their head in the sand again about the underwing and the underbody, but it's definitely, in my opinion, a huge part of why these cars are flipping. All right, enough about that. Let's get to the good finishers because there's a nice, good stories on this list. Harrison Burton leading the way, of course, with the win, 100th win for Wood Brothers. I feel like this is going to be a super popular win. Except for the man who finished in second here, the Kyle Busch fans, they are not happy with the win. They feel like Harrison Burton went below the yellow line without assistance from Kyle Busch. They said he was blocking. That's why Kyle Busch made the contact with him. So they are still mad about the double yellow line thing down there. And there's other people that aren't Kyle Busch fans, but I'm just saying the vast majority of Kyle Busch fans are mad about it. Anyway, Kyle Busch finished the second. He was so close to getting that win, extending the streak and getting into the playoffs, but it was not to be today. Christopher Bell finishes in third. He was working with Kyle Busch, but got a bad push from whoever was behind him. I think it was Ricky Stenhouse in the 47, but not 100% sure off the top of my head right now. But they never could get the bottom lane organized, so Harrison Burton ends up with the top line. They were more organized and got the win. Cody Ware finishes fourth. Ty Gibbs in fifth place. Bubba Wallace finishes sixth after being involved in a wreck, but he was able to still be out there, and pretty much that's all you had to be at the end of this race was out there to get a top 10, it looked like. But did help him playoff-wise, even though he's going to be out of the cut line, and we'll get to that in just a minute. Parker Retzlaff, a good run for him, finished seventh. He's catching a little bit of flack because he was a Chevrolet and he didn't help Kyle Busch. So even in his greatest moments thus far in his Cup Series career, at least, Parker Retzlaff gets the good finish, but also gets some criticism. Hey, that's NASCAR. The fans are passionate, no doubt about it. Brad Keselowski finishing in 8th place here. He had to recover from a black flag situation for jumping the restart, allegedly. Daniel Hemrick finishing in 9th place. Good run for him. Chris Buescher finishing in 10th place. And because of the stage points, will be the last man on the cut line. which we'll see in just a minute. But Carson Hocevar 11th, Ross Chastain 12th. Good run for Chastain, but it's just not going to work out for him. He's going to be within a few points of Bubba down there as well. Zane Smith 13th, continues his good second half of the season. It's a good run for him. Chase Briscoe 14th, and John Hunter Nemechek with that battered machine finishes in 15th. That was the good race, but here is the bad race. Shane Van Gisbergen finishing 35th. He grenaded that motor. Not sure exactly what happened. I think he ran over some debris, and I'm going to go with debris because 2 other cars cut tires at the same time that his engine exploded. So I'm pretty sure he hit some type of debris, and that's what caused the catastrophic engine failure there. But we'll find out more when they release details on that. But it was announced he is going to be full-time. I'm going to make a whole separate video on that. That'll either be out later tonight or early tomorrow. Chase Elliott, 36. He had a good run going, but once again caught up in one of those wrecks. Denny Hamlin, a bad few weeks for him. The points penalty, he thought he was going to win at Richmond and then gets taken out in this race as well. Then you see down here at the very bottom, connected with Denny Hamlin, to be totally honest, Daniel Suarez, who had that very strange fire situation in the pits where his car, the back end of it at least, basically burned up. Because as he was trying to exit his pit, he got blocked in. He blocked in Denny Hamlin. Denny Hamlin went into his pit stall, and Denny Hamlin's exhaust lit a fire on the gas that spilled out and set Daniel Suarez's car on fire. So just a freak thing. Not the only fire in this race. SVG's car going up in flames as well. So there was a lot of fire in this race as well. So from a safety standpoint, NASCAR probably has several cars to look at going forward. Now let's look at the points, and your regular season points championship comes down to these guys right here. 17 points separates Kyle Larson from Tyler Reddick, and only 1 point separates Kyle Larson from Chase Elliott. So going into Darlington, if Tyler Reddick has any type of trouble, or if either Chase Elliott or Kyle Larson can get a couple of stage wins and shrink that gap quite considerably, it's anybody's race between those 3, but those are the only 3 that can compete for the regular season title, which gives those extra 15 or so bonus points in the playoffs. Of course, more people, however, are interested in the cut line, and here is the cut line as it stands right now. Chris Buescher, last man in. Of course, if a new driver, and I say this because Darlington typically has a lot of first-time winners over there, so if somebody below these 16 in points right here gets the win, that's going to bump out Chris Buescher, and that would put Ty Gibbs on the line. So if Ty Gibbs, he's only plus 39. So if Ty Gibbs has any trouble at Darlington, it's going to be very close for him getting in. I think he's got just enough of a points cushion that it won't matter one way or the other, but definitely can't rest easy. He's going to have at least a halfway decent run. But here you see Bubba Wallace minus 21 to the cut line. If nobody extra wins, Bubba Wallace plus 21 to the cut line. And Ross Chastain minus 27 to the cut line. Kyle Busch 100. Everybody below them is, I think mathematically, they have to win to get in. That, of course, if Austin Dillon doesn't win final appeal. If Austin Dillon wins final appeal, then Ty Gibbs is the last man on the cut line. And Chris Buescher would be 18 behind him. And I'm not saying Austin Dillon will win. I'm just saying it is a possibility. Nobody thought Hendrick would win their appeal either, so just throwing it out there. We've talked about it enough. Not getting into that one again. Week 3 of the Richmond Gate. All right, that's all I got for you on this one. If you made it this far, would love to have your subscription. If not, I'll just keep making these things. If you're already subscribed, you know I appreciate you all as well. If you got a question, comment, or anything like that, leave it down in the comment section. I try to get to as many of them as I can. If you want to help out the channel, visit the merch store. Right now, if you buy a hat and put a t-shirt in the cart with it, the t-shirt is free. So we've got that going on. And other than that, thanks for your time. Enjoy your Sunday. Peace.